This is A Different Perspective with Kevin Randle. Kevin is a retired United States Army Lieutenant Colonel who has studied UFOs for more than 50 years. His military training has provided him with unique insight into military operations and UFO research. Kevin has investigated many of the most mysterious cases and has been consulted for dozens of documentaries and been interviewed on hundreds of radio and television programs about UFOs. Considered to be one of the leading experts on the Roswell UFO crash, Kevin has written more than 25 books about UFOs, including Roswell in the 21st Century and Encounter in the Desert, a re-examination of the Socorro UFO landing. Now here's the host of A Different Perspective, Kevin Randle.
And welcome to this edition of A Different Perspective. I'm Kevin Randle, and for no reason whatsoever, I've decided this is the beginning of Season 4 of A Different Perspective, and I will number it sequentially from that point. Before I get to William Puckett, who is my guest today, I had a couple of things I wanted to mention. First of all, I reactivated the blog called The Science Fiction Site, putting up some new material. For those of you interested in science fiction, you might want to take a look at it. You can find it at The Science Fiction Site, all one word, all lowercase, .blogspot.com. And because people have asked me repeatedly about my Vietnam experiences, and there's a reissuing of a number of books that I wrote with Bob Cornett back in the 1980s called the Vietnam Ground Zero series, I put up a blog cleverly called Vietnam Ground Zero by Eric Helm. It can be found at www.vietnamgroundzero.blogspot.com. Vietnam Ground Zero, all one word, all lowercase. It is my recollections of my year in Vietnam. You can read about that there. In fact, just today I put one up about Bobby the Weather Girl. And those of you who were in Vietnam in 67, 68, 69 know about Bobby the Weather Girl. I think it's something that's kind of interesting. I'm going to be speaking here momentarily with William Puckett, who was employed as a meteorologist with the National Weather Service for 3 years and the Environmental Protection Agency for 27 years. He is retired from government service in 2007. He is a professional member of the American Meteorological Society. Puckett has worked as a consultant for the UFO Hunters series on the History Channel and has appeared in 2 UFO Hunters episodes. He has appeared on an episode on the Science Channel's Close Encounter series. He is also a research associate with NARCAP, the National Reporting Center for Anomalous Phenomena. He is credited with meteorological and radar analysis for the November 7th, 2006 UFO Incident at O'Hare in Chicago. Puckett was formerly the state director for the MUFON UFO Network in Montana. He is a certified field investigator from MUFON and has written several technical articles for the MUFON Journal. He has been a guest on many talk shows, radio programs, and interviewed for some TV programs. Puckett continues his work as an independent investigator and presents the results of his studies on his websites, UFOs Northwest and UFO Sightings Montana, which is www.ufosightingsmontana.com, UFO Sightings Montana, all one word, all lowercase, and www.ufosnw.com, which is, I think, his main website. William Puckett, welcome to A Different Perspective.
Good to talk to you, Kevin. Having a nice windy day here in Helena, so I hope we can keep the power on, but everything's going great, and I'm looking forward to discussing the UFO enigma with you. I collected a lot of reports in the past few years and have some pretty compelling reports to talk about.
Well, I will say here at my house, I will never be without power for more than 10 seconds. I installed a standby generator after we lost power for 8 days. So,
well, you're lucky. I had one when I was on the West Coast in Ocean Shores, Washington, but I've got solar panels on my house, but they turn them off when the grid goes down, so I can't use them. So I'm still on the grid.
well, I looked into solar panels, but the company here that installed them said they had no battery backup. So they worked when the sun was out, but it would not carry you through the night. So I said, I need something that does better than that. So I have a standby generator, which doesn't get us into UFOs. Your website at UFO SNW. You collect UFO sightings on that website. Is that correct?
That's correct. I get reports from all over the world. I also have another blog called reportaufosighting.com, which is strictly just to catch UFO reports. Also want to add that my site is mobile friendly, all my blogs. The fonts and everything are reformatted, so people can text me their reports. A lot of different ways they can get reports to me. But yeah, most of my reports come from the United States, but I get some pretty good reports overseas too, particularly England. One gentleman over there, I will mention his name, he's not anonymous, John Mooner, seemingly takes a lot of good photos of UFOs, and some are quite compelling. So,
But I find somebody takes a lot of photos of UFOs probably are faking them. I mean, what are the odds you're going to have an opportunity to see UFOs on multiple occasions? Most people never see them at all.
well, you got a good point there. With John, I don't think he's faking them. I can't prove that he's not. I know that my methodology of photo analysis is I look at the metadata trail of the photo, and I can tell generally if they've doctored it with Photoshop or Microsoft photo editor, etc. Of course, a good hoaxer can cover their tracks, but I don't think he's hoaxing them. A lot of people do. I agree when they see him on repeated locations. He's one of the few people that I do believe that is seeing real UFOs, but because I've had other reports from the same area where he gets reports, I think it's a hot spot.
Well, I know Betty Hill had many UFO sightings and took pictures of UFOs. And I think she was seeing a lot of mundane objects that she couldn't readily identify and just assumed they were UFOs. And having not seen his photographs, I don't know how detailed they are, if they're streaks of light, points of light, blobs of light. I don't know what they look like. But I'm just very suspicious of somebody would be taking multiple photographs of UFOs.
Well, yeah, I'm more skeptical in that regard too. I don't post all his reports, and some of his reports I've debunked as being contrails and birds and insects, etc. I do think seemingly some people seem to have a psychic ability to track these things, but that's anecdotal. I can't prove that. People that I've talked to seemingly have had more paranormal experiences, sometimes seem to catch these. But yes, I'm more skeptical. Also skeptical when people see things on repeated nights. You can almost bet that they're celestial phenomena. Generally, what I do is I put reports out there on my site. I give my speculative analysis and let the readers decide for themselves what they are. I present the evidence. I do some investigation, like I said, meta-trail analysis with photos. I am one of the few UFO investigators that does aviation radar analysis. I'm working on a couple cases right now. And, I do get videos and once in a while trace cases, which I'll send in and get analyzed. So, I scrutinize the things as best I can. And also, I might add, I don't know whether you're aware of it, it's called the MADAR network, Multiple Anomalous Data Automated Recording. It's a little device about the size of a package of cigarettes. I don't smoke cigarettes anymore, but I used to. And it detects magnetic anomalies. And you have to have a pretty strong magnetic field to trigger it. And we got different thresholds set. So we are looking at electromagnetic anomalies in relation to UFOs, and that device will pick it up.
Well, since you brought up the magnetic anomalies, and this is an area that I'm quite interested in, especially after the Levelland sightings in 1957. Are we getting? And for those that don't know, the Levelland sightings were the object seen close to the cars. It stalled the engine, dimmed the headlights, filled the radios with static, and over a period of a couple of hours in the Levelland area, with witnesses at multiple locations reporting it to the sheriff, and the sheriff himself becoming involved. The question, though, is I've noticed there's a reduction in the number of sightings like that, the electromagnetic sightings. Do you get many electromagnetic sightings in this day?
Well, I'm looking at my page right now under electrical interference, and I have had in 2020, looking right here, quite a few reports. One particular report I just mentioned, Green Bay, Wisconsin, November 29th, 2020, and a triangular red, green, white object causes streetlight outages. And witness states family was driving in Green Bay, Wisconsin. I saw a flat triangular object that had red, white, and green layers, had a strange silhouette. No individual lights were noted on the triangle. Object was coming down, then hovered, moved to the left. The object appeared to be tumbling over. Object was seen near railroad tracks. When the object went by streetlights, they went out. And it was close to Lambeau Field in Green Bay, if you're a football fan. So, and I just got that report, that was late November 2020. So yes, I am still getting reports. I don't get as many of them. One thing I want to mention to you, Kevin, is one good one that I had. And you mentioned Roswell. Well, this was in the area of Vaughn, New Mexico, a truck driver. Data citing June 23rd, 2009, 1:30 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. And the witness was driving, he had a load of cars that he picked up in Denver at a used car auction, a car rental agency. And he pulled off the road, I'm trying to remember the name of the road he was on here, and he was on the way to El Paso, Texas from Denver, and he was starting to unload his cars as he went south. And he pulled off the road, and immediately he felt kind of like his hair was standing on edge. It was a very clear night, and he looks up and he sees this huge triangular object with multiple lights. All of a sudden his truck shuts down and his flashlight wouldn't work and everything just went dead. And he panicked, and suddenly this object hovered right over the top of him, reverse direction, went back to the south, and then he had unloaded a car, because that's what he did in emergencies, and he couldn't start the car. So he immediately, when the object retreated, his truck started, a flashlight worked, he got out of there. And here's the interesting part. He gets to El Paso the next morning, and he looks, and all his clocks are 13 minutes slow. It shut down the clocks. It could have been a time dilation. Yet his wind-up clock and his sleeper was right on. That's how he knew that they all lost 13 minutes. And he lived in California, Long Beach, and he got back to Long Beach, and his nephew was a police officer, and he told his nephew, and he called me. And I actually have the interview on my site. If you can listen to the interview with the gentleman. And so that's one of the best electromagnetic reports I've ever had.
Well, let me ask you a couple of questions. First of all, he's probably on Highway 54 if he was in Vaughn and he was heading toward El Paso. That would be my guess.
Right. Yes, you're right, Kevin. Highway 54 between Vaughn and Alamogordo. That's where he was.
And I've been to Vaughn many, many times on my way from Albuquerque to Roswell, so I'm familiar with Vaughn.
Me too.
The other thing is, I'll ask my other question when we get back. I've noticed that I'm getting close to the commercial break here. I've got to take a quick break before the music plays for me. You're listening to A Different Perspective on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. We'll be right back, so please stick around. I am here with William Puckett. We are engaged in social distancing for those of you who care about such things. He being apparently in Montana and me being nowhere near Montana. We were talking about electromagnetic effects in UFOs, and before I took the break, which sneaked up on me for some reason, I was going to ask a question, and you mentioned the truck stalled and he couldn't get the car started, that he'd taken off the truck and that sort of thing. When the UFO left and everything came back, did he have to start the truck or did it start spontaneously?
That's a good question. I believe, let me check that for sure so I don't give you any false information here. Let's see.
What I noticed is, and I was going through Mark Roddiker's massive thing on UFO electrical interference with vehicle interference. And the rumor had been, and the Condon Committee used it to discredit these things, saying that there was no way they could understand physically that if you stalled a car engine with an electromagnetic field, once you remove that field, that the car would start spontaneously. And I began to look at all the reports, and a lot of them didn't say the car started spontaneously, that the car could be started, the car was started, or something like that. And I interpret that to mean that the driver took some action, although in Level Land there was one guy who said no, it started spontaneously, the others did not. And so that was a question I began asking everybody, is did it start spontaneously or did you have to take some action?
I believe he had to start the truck. The cue for him was the flashlight came back on, and that's when as the object retreated.
And that's not the same. That's not the same as a car starting spontaneously when
No, it's not.
Field and you've interrupted the electrical field in some fashion. But when the light comes back on, that's not the same as starting the car. So that's kind of an interesting thing. The 13 minutes. Was he aware of the sighting lasting that long? Are we suggesting some kind of missing time here, or is it just that sighting lasted that long?
He was unclear about that. I think my understanding is that he thought time had gone by pretty fast, and he didn't know about the time loss until he looked at the clock when he got to El Paso.
But he got out of his truck cab and he tried to start a car that he'd taken off the trailer.
Yes, he did.
So he was taking some actions and doing some things. So 13 minutes really isn't that long considering him doing other things to suggest.
My understanding is that he did not, that 13 minutes was reasonable. And, he didn't indicate to me that he felt like he had a time loss or time distortion. That was my understanding.
Okay. That's a fascinating sighting and fits right in with a lot of the work where the UFO has interacted with the environment. Unfortunately, unless there are some kind of measurements made, and there are, I think, discussions of magnetic mapping of the vehicles and that sort of thing that might give you an indication of whether a very strong magnetic field had been, or the vehicles have been exposed to a strong magnetic field. But very few people are set up to do that. I know the Condon Committee rejected going to Level Land and that sort of thing because they couldn't find the cars and they couldn't do the proper measurements. They just kind of ignored the whole electromagnetic effect thing, which is kind of surprising. But that was the guy going to El Paso. And you mentioned a family in Wisconsin that had some kind of electromagnetic, it was the street lights that went out?
Yeah, they saw this triangular object moving right along the railroad tracks. They were driving, and as it passed a street light, the street light would go out, and it would just blink, blink, blink. Then they'd come back on. And now maybe another possibility with that is that the object might have been bright and the lights could have been photosensitive, but I don't know that. It could have been electromagnetic. It could have been photocells in the streetlights, depending on the type of streetlights they were.
But the car exhibited no electromagnetic effect.
No, not. There was no mention. I'd like to revisit one thing about cars and trucks and electromagnetic interference. Keep in mind that diesels pre-ignite. There's no spark. So an electrical ignition system, the presumption is that it's affecting electromagnetic anomalies are affecting the electrical system. Diesels pre-ignite. They don't use spark plugs. So that's a distinction. So I just wanted to mention that.
And
And
is it,
also too, you talk about leveling, and I can remember that case in November 1957. It was in the national news. It spooked everybody out. And at the 50th anniversary of that, I did a bunch of analysis. I got a bunch of magazines and everything from the Roswell Museum. I found just numerous locations, Oklahoma, Texas Panhandle, and New Mexico. Military civilian witnesses all had their cars turned off. And the military's explanation, Project Blue Book, says it's ball lightning. Ball lightning in the 30s with fog? I mean, I'm a professional meteorologist. That's the most crazy explanation. They could have come up with a better crazy explanation than that. I mean, that's just laughable. It's ludicrous.
well, I was going to revisit one point you made about the object being so bright it turned off the photoelectric cells. And I'd done an investigation in Utah where we had an electromagnetic effects like that. And the explanation was a bolide, which you know is, of course, a bright meteor,
Right.
setting up the photoelectric cells of the streetlights. And that's why the streetlights went out. But one of the police officers I talked to said, well, yeah, that's strange because I looked up into the doctor's office that was right near where I was, and the lights went out there too, and they weren't on a photoelectric cell. And that was why I asked if the car had been affected. So I think your explanation that the brightness of the object probably was the problem there as opposed to an electromagnetic field. And
Right.
We've talked on this program about Leveland many, many times. I'm not sure if the listeners are interested in hearing another story of either Roswell or Leveland, but both cases are very important. The Leveland case, I think, is much more diverse than people understand. And the other thing I wanted to mention was there was one case where there were two cars too close together, and one had a diesel engine, and the one with the regular gasoline engine failed, and the diesel engine did not. When the
That makes sense.
UFO approach, so it suggests again what you were saying. But do you don't get many of these cases anymore, electromagnetic cases?
No, I'm looking at my site. I got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's about, in the past 2 years, about a dozen cases. And they may not be current cases, but I mean, some of them are older cases. But, I do get them. I've had another power outages, massive power outages also around UFO activity. And sometimes you got to be careful with that too, because you can have meteorological, I mean, like I'm just talking to you today. I mean, we got this horrific windstorm. I measured wind gusts. I have a professional weather station, 55 miles an hour today. And so you got to be careful with that too. But I have had, a good 15 cases in the past 2 years, electromagnetic interference. And some of them older ones. Well, let me go into this one here. A remote part of Ohio, December 2nd, 1974, 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. A woman and her brother were driving across Ohio right after Thanksgiving Day weekend, 1974, traveling Pennsylvania to California. She was 20 and her brother was 18. They were in a remote area in a 2-lane highway about 20 minutes from the nearest town. The car radio lights started intermittently going out. Then after a few minutes, the car radio and lights died. It was about 3 a.m. The woman and her brother were alarmed and decided to get some sleep and planned to seek help the next morning. About 30 minutes later, they saw a red flash like a meteor that went straight across the field. Then the car, lights, and radio came on. They drove away. Her car never did this before or after the incident. And she said she kept this to herself for years. Her brother called when the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind came out and advised her to go see it. She did so, and that was the sighting was almost exactly like the car scenes in the movie, which, of course, Steven Spielberg based that on UFO sighting reports. So, that's another example. And, I just got that report. I posted that report in May of 2019, but it's, a report, over nearly.
Well, we have seen a lot of these things, electromagnetic reports, kind of spike in certain times. The Levelland case, as you mentioned, was a time where there were a lot of these kind of electromagnetic cases reported, and then it drops off, and we've seen another spike later on of the cases, but it's not something that goes on for quite a long time. So I wondered if we're talking about craft that operate on a different level than some of the other craft that are reported, that the electromagnetic effects are only reported with certain kinds of craft or certain sightings. And that's always concerned me about some of these reports. And we kind of look at all of the UFO phenomenon that way, that we get kind of a spike in reports of a certain kind. And I'm thinking of the occupant sightings that sometimes are revealed. We have reports from the 1973, for example, when there were lots and lots of the occupant reports in all over the United States, for example, or 1954 in France, quite a few occupant reports. So we've had some trouble that way. And I was going to ask you about occupant reports as we kind of wind down the electromagnetic cases. You get a lot of the occupant reports now in today's environment.
Yes, that's correct, Kevin. One that I specifically like to mention, I've put a lot of time in this, is a case in Las Vegas, Nevada. Of all days, November 22nd, 2020, and a gentleman, it was about a little before 7 o'clock in the morning, and he was looking out his south window, and he saw a bright green light, and he was closing the blinds because his daughter was sleeping on the couch. So he went out, took his camera, and this bright green object starts moving towards him, and it took him about 4 minutes to walk to a parking lot. He snapped several photos, and he snapped most of the photos in a 2-minute period and shows this real bright object. And then this robotic type entity, somewhat transparent, steps out right in front of him out of the object, about 150, he estimated about 140 feet from him.
Let me interrupt you there, because I'm going to have to take a break. Don't want to do it, but we'll come back to a guy seeing an occupant in Las Vegas not that long ago. I wanted to mention that there are other fine programs about the paranormal on the X Zone Broadcast Network at xzbn.net. Take a look at the listings at the X Zone website, and I'm sure you're going to find something that'll spark your interest. And I also wanted to thank those who have purchased the Best of Project Blue Book. It's been up and down on the Amazon bestseller list. So if you enjoyed it, please rate it and write a review, because that does help spread the word. And also take a look at Encounter in the Desert, which deals with the Lonnie Zamora sightings. And be sure to take a look at Roswell in the 21st Century, which I think is more of a cold case review of that series of sightings. And for fun, take a look at www.vietnamgroundzero.blogspot.com, because I think that'll give you an idea of what some of my background is working with the military. We'll be talking with William Puckett more about UFOs and occupants, and his website, which is www.ufosnw.com. We will be back right after this, so please stick around. I am here with William Puckett. We are back, obviously. We're talking about UFOs. We're going to talk about an occupant sighting from Las Vegas, Nevada, which I think will be interesting when we get to it. Um, in upcoming weeks, I just wanted to mention quickly, in upcoming weeks, I think we're going to have some fascinating guests on here. Next week, I hope to have a guy on who's actually been to Oak Island a number of times working with the Gaines brothers to get us an update on what they're finding there or not finding. And following that, the astronomer, Avi Loeb, who is a Harvard astronomer, has said he's going to come on the program to talk about this alien artifact that passed through the solar system a couple of years ago, and his theory that it was an artificial artifact as opposed to some kind of natural object that had passed through the solar system. We'll bring him up and talk to him about that and his experiences with the scientific community with his oddball idea and his feelings on UFOs. Anyhow, when we went away, I was talking to William about, or he was talking to me about a sighting in Las Vegas where there was a green light. He had made a number of photographs of it, and take it away.
Well, the gentleman snapped 15 photographs, and the debunkers are saying that these are lens flares. Well, a couple of them were, but he saw this object. It was so bright that he had to shield his eyes from it. And it moved closer and closer to him. It's moving towards the north. He lives in North Las Vegas. And then after a couple of minutes, this being, robotic being with appendages that didn't seem to be connected, was hovering right in front of him. And he was mesmerized for 4 or 5 minutes. And he got photos of the being, and only one of them he has showed. The best ones aren't on there yet. The photo that I got doesn't look real compelling, but he said the being was transparent, and it was like it was distorting the area around him. So I wouldn't expect a photo to look like a normal being, but he is quite willing to take a lie detector test. I mean, the guy is reliable, and I don't have any reason to question him. And I have, in addition to looking at the photos, I do have good radar data from McCarran Airport in Las Vegas and Nellis Air Force Base, and I'm starting to look at the radar data. I don't know whether it's going to show the object or not. I'm still looking at it. But the object, if you go to my site and just go to my home page, www.ufosnw.com, and scroll down, you'll find the report on the home page. The object looks, it looks like it's changing shape. It's not uniform. And normally with lens flares, particularly with cell phones, you will get a green dot, but this isn't a uniform green dot. It's different. And the debunkers are saying it's lens flare. And my criticism of people that analyze photos is that they don't listen to what the witness says. The witness saw the object. If somebody takes a photo and then finds something after the fact, you can question it. That is not the case with this report.
Well, I'll interject. Let me interject here. The thinking of it being a lens flare, I can understand people being fooled by lens flares, and there's been any number of UFO photographs that have been published saying, here's a UFO and it is a lens flare, and you know it's a lens flare by the way it looks. But I can't imagine anybody taking 15 pictures of an open area where there's nothing to see and getting a lens flare in it that would fool you. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I can understand somebody taking a photograph and finding the lens flare after they took the photograph, but I don't know how anybody would take a photograph of a lens flare, if you know what I mean. You're not out there seeing the lens flare and photographing it.
That's exactly my thinking. And also I might mention, I did look at the meta-analysis of the photos, and he did not tamper with them. And this witness doesn't have the know-how. I mean, he had trouble getting the photos to me. I mean, a lot of organized hoaxer, generally going to have some analytical skills and to cover his tracks. But I have 2 interviews with a witness on my site. The first one is the best, when he actually taped the call with him when he reported the UFO to me. And he's really excited about what he saw. And another thing, the debunkers will say, why didn't anybody else see it? This is 7 o'clock in the morning, 6:50 in the morning in Las Vegas, Nevada on a Sunday morning. not many people are up in Sun City. The ones that are pretty hungover probably. So now, granted, he did take the photos towards the sun. The sun was coming up. There was a cloud deck at 14,000 feet, kind of off the horizon. And but I have every reason to believe that this is a genuine UFO. And I just the debunkers are always going to. You're never going to convince some of these people. I
Well,
mean, you could.
you live in Montana, and this is Las Vegas, so I imagine you have not met the man in person.
No, I would go down there and look at the site, but I'm 73 years old, and I've been sheltered in place almost a year, and I expect to get my COVID shots. Maybe I'll make a visit later on in the year, but I'm not going to go anywhere until I'm vaccinated, until he is too, because you can still transmit the disease. Now, granted, he has pitched this case to a lot of other UFO investigators, National UFO Reporting Center, and also MUFON. And MUFON had a field investigator, and he was going to go out and investigate, but he got COVID, and for some reason or not, MUFON lost interest in it. I did talk to MUFON headquarters about it. They called me, and I gave them my perspective that I do think the guy's telling the truth. I have no reason to doubt his story. Everything he has told me, I've verified. His cell phone, some cell phones with GPS, the location, the GPS on the cell phone is exactly where he said he was when he said he was. So everything that he has told me, I've been able to technically verify. So I have a high degree of confidence that this is a genuine UFO report and close encounter of the third kind. I
And
really
you
do
have
believe that.
you have a copy of the photograph one of the photographs he took of the alien creature or the being or the
One.
robot.
Yeah. He has got 4 or 5 of them that he's holding out on.
But you've seen one of them.
Yeah. It doesn't look real compelling, but again, something that's from another dimension or parallel universe or where UFOs come from, I wouldn't, and transparent, they're probably not going to show up real good, but he claims in the photos he hasn't released yet do show the entity pretty clearly. So I don't know when he's going to let him go. He actually, at my suggestion, has got copies of the photos, one copy with a lawyer and another one with a police officer who's a homicide investigator. I think he may be retired, and he's got copies with him. He was freaked out by the government. Well, they're going to come and get my photos. And I said, well, I haven't had much experience with that, but I just suggested have copies of the photos with some trusted people. And to my knowledge, no one besides himself, even though these other people have the photos, have looked at the entity photos. So that's where that stands. I am looking at the radar data. I looked at the Doppler data, the weather radar. I didn't find anything compelling, but I don't expect UFOs to show up very well on Doppler data because the beam width is only a degree. So if a UFO flies through that beam with a degree, it'll pick it up. Whereas aviation radar data is ground to infinity, with a beam width. And so, it's designed to pick up UFOs. So I'm looking at Las Vegas McCarran Airport data now, and I'm also going to look at Nellis Air Force Base data. He was closer to Nellis in North Las Vegas where he had the sighting. But like I said, I've verified everything that he's told me. I've not caught him in any lies. He admits that a couple of the photos were probably lens flares. So it's one of the better reports that I've received in the past couple of years.
Other occupant reports you've received that are interesting?
Yeah, I've had some. Actually, I got another one here, and see if I can find this real quick. Let's see. It was I believe that was in Washington State, and a gentleman.
Well, while you're looking for that, the question I have: what all do you do to vet the witnesses and vet the sightings that you get in? Because you must get many, many sightings, and I can't imagine you can vet them all.
Well, I do post all my reports, but I don't investigate, a lot of them in detail. A few of them I do, but a lot of them I don't. And a lot of the reports I get, are really, I'm basing just what the witness tells me, and what their experience is.
So
So
you're sort of providing a forum for people to report their UFO sightings, and you're not saying that these really are alien craft or anything like that. You're saying, here's a report I received, and here's the information, but I'm not sure how reliable the report is, or if the witness misidentified Venus, for example.
right. Well, I have good sites for determining astronomical, um, data. I've got the U.S. Naval Observatory software that I look at astronomical phenomena. The website Heavens Above for satellites, and a good number of reports, a great volume of reports have been due to uh, Starlink satellites. Just last spring, I was just uh, saturated with reports from Starlink satellites, and and you know they I got so many of them that I just actually what I did was is I just made a page for them on a monthly basis because I just couldn't handle them anymore. And and then you know and then Venus, people, and Jupiter, you know they're those are another bunch that I get, and generally I'm able to, and the space station, that's another one that
So
um,
what you're saying basically is that when you get a report, you take a look at the various information you have, the direction the object was from the witness, for example, or the time of day, and you look for something that is either artificial in the realm of it's a satellite or something like that, or looking for a natural phenomenon that may fit the facts.
that's right. And but
When you post
most of my reports, I would say they've not been investigated in detail. I mean, I have had some reports where I will actually go out and collect data, on site visit. But I don't do to, particularly since COVID, obviously, is I don't do many uh, on-site visits, but I do.
Well, when you get a report and it turns out that you've got some kind of say an astronomical object, Venus, in the location where the UFO is, do you mention that on the site as well, saying this seems to be Venus, or
Absolutely,
qualify it?
absolutely, yes, I do. And with with the WordPress software, I categorize my sightings, and I have unidentified, close encounter, electromagnetic, and and I do that. So here's the one I want to the case you just mentioned about another entity case. This happened in Beaverton, Oregon, Christmas Day of all days. And the gentleman writes, I saw a UFO drone and aliens set up a portal. Again, that sounds a little far out, but he said, I took pictures from outside the portal, which is by my bedroom window. The aliens followed me downtown, and last night, December 27th, a little suspicious, but yet he took a photo.
Let me interrupt you here. Let me interrupt you here because I'm running up against the break time, and we have to pay for the program somehow. So we'll have the commercials coming up here. As I say, there's some other fine programs about the paranormal on the X Zone Broadcast Network. Take a look at that. And you are listening to A Different Perspective on the X Zone Broadcast Network. I'm Kevin Randle, and I will return shortly with William Puckett, and we'll wrap this thing up and let you go off to do the things you have to do. We will be back right after this, so please stick around. Obviously, we are back. I'm joined by William Puckett. He has a website, www.ufosnw.com. It's all lowercase, and he puts up lots of UFO sightings that are interesting. We were talking about a fellow who saw an alien set up a portal. What exactly does that mean?
What he said is this beam of light came down right in front of his window, bedroom window, and hooded figures and entities came out of it. And he took a photo, and I don't, it's kind of a strange photo. I've got it on my site. The title of the report is UFO Drone and Alien Setup Portal, which is what he said. But the photo is kind of strange. And the report is a bit speculative. It sounds kind of anecdotal, like this guy's prone to exaggeration, but yet the photo's interesting. So I felt it worthy to mention that. And another report that I'd like to go to that I think is quite interesting, and I kind of call this an X-file. This was in Southern California, January 2020, and the gentleman that had this report is a real great artist and made an artistic graphical display. And witness says, I will not divulge my identity nor my exact location. However, I will let you know this happened in Southern California. Here's my story. Middle of January 2020, I fell asleep while watching TV. I woke at about 2 a.m. to the sound of someone talking on TV. It wasn't very loud, and I thought that I should have turned off the TV. Then I noticed something coming out of the corner of my eye. I turned to look and saw a black mass hovering over our table in the kitchen area. It was completely silent. Panic set in. I was petrified at what I saw. I could not breathe nor move. I was frozen in fear. I tried to get out a scream but couldn't. I tried and tried. Then I eventually found myself screaming over and over again. My wife, who was asleep, ran into the room. While she's entering the room, I saw the black mass in our kitchen, and then it shrink and disappear completely. Now, the debunkers are saying this was sleep paralysis. He was awake and wide awake when he saw this thing. And there's a very nice illustration on my site, a sketch. So is it an entity, something else in the paranormal world? I don't know, but it's pretty strange.
Well, when you're talking about something like that, I think of UFOs or alien visitation as something coming from interstellar space, something coming from another planet. This sounds like a suggestion that it was some kind of interdimensional contact.
Exactly. And I do think, my own opinion, that some UFOs, and maybe a lot of them, are parallel universe, higher dimensional phenomena. And I think that's why there's a lot of electromagnetic interference. They're distorting time and gravity and magnetic fields. And I do believe that some UFOs, including the one in Las Vegas, may very well be higher dimensional or parallel universe. And most physicists are pretty well agreed that there are parallel universes out there. Some of them can't harbor life, but who knows? It's pretty strange. So, that's another entity report that sticks in my mind. I've got many more on my site. That's what more of the recent reports.
As I say, this strikes me more as something from the paranormal world as opposed to the UFO world. That it's not really related to interstellar flight. And I'm always a little bit worried about that thing. And I'll say something else, because I did a book called The Abduction Enigma with Russ Estes and Bill Cohn, oh good Lord, 20 years ago. And we looked into sleep paralysis in depth. And there are cases of sleep paralysis, depending on the witness. It's called cataplexy, actually, where it's basically sleep paralysis while you're wide awake. If we have nothing concrete, I will say concrete, to pin this to, there's this distinct possibility that it's some sort of a form of sleep paralysis. You don't have to be asleep or going to sleep or just waking up for sleep paralysis to kick in. There are, as I said, cataplexy, which is type of sleep paralysis where you would see an entity. And I know with sleep paralysis, I think in about 80% of the cases of sleep paralysis, the victim, the object of the sleep paralysis believes there's been an entity in the room with them. And I have to agree with the skeptics. This sounds an awful lot like a episode of sleep paralysis in some form.
Well, that's a possibility. However, my argument against that is most people that have sleep paralysis and sleepwalk have repeated episodes. This is the only time it ever happened to the person. So you may be right, but yet I have to argue on the other side.
I would argue the point that most people have repeated episodes of sleep paralysis. That's not my experience. And as I said, we looked into this in depth a long time ago. I investigated a case in Utah, which was just completely baffling until I came across sleep paralysis. I'm now absolutely convinced that even though the woman claimed to have been abducted and that sort of thing, I am convinced that it was an episode of sleep paralysis, which is not to say all abductions can be reduced to sleep paralysis. But in this particular case in Utah, I believe sleep paralysis is a legitimate answer for it. So we have to be careful separating psychological phenomenon from cases where it's some kind of an outside influence.
Well, you're more versed on it than I am. I just, I personally, I've never had a case of sleep paralysis, but I know that it happens. I don't know. Apparently, you say it doesn't happen repeatedly, but and I didn't classify this as a UFO report. I've actually classified it as an X file. I have a category on my site called X files because I do get ghostly and other paranormal phenomena, and I put them in that category, X files. But again, paranormal phenomena overlap. At least I believe they do.
Oh, there's no question about that. There is an overlap between UFO phenomenon and paranormal phenomenon and extrasensory perception and all of that sort of thing. I wouldn't argue that point, but I'm just saying that given the facts as you've discussed them here with me, I suspect that it's more of a psychological explanation than it would be something tangible, I guess is the way to say it.
Yeah, I can't totally refute that. It's like I said, I'm not.
I think as investigators, we're required to look at all explanations and look at all the science that is available to us and say, well, this is a very strange case. It doesn't fit into the UFO category. It moves into the paranormal, but are there paranormal phenomenon or psychological phenomena that explain it? I think as an investigator, we have to look at that and say, well, this leans toward a more mundane explanation than something extraordinary.
Well, that's correct. I just said this is an interesting case and one for the X Files in my comments, and I do have comment. My site is a blog format. And I entertained comments. There were people that said it was sleep paralysis. One person says, I don't believe it was sleep paralysis either. I was wide awake and I didn't notice a thing until I sat up in my chair and leaned forward. Lately, I was doing some research and it seemed others have reported similar things. And he puts a link to the Skinwalker Ranch, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And so I entertain comments, and unless they're totally sarcastic and demeaning, I don't publish them, but I'm open-minded. And again, I can't, I don't investigate a lot of these cases in detail. I put them out there and present the data and let the witnesses make up their own mind. And sometimes I'll give my speculative explanation. And so that's what I do.
Len Stringfield, who was collecting cases of crash retrievals, often said that in his status reports, he would collect the data, maybe not analyze it in depth given the numbers that he was getting, and he put it out there for others to take a look at to see if they could come up with an explanation for it or if they had more information on it. And I think that's a fine thing to do. Share the information, share the data, and if we come up with an explanation, we write that one off and we move on to the next one. But Len would put his analysis on it if he thought there was an explanation for it, and if he didn't have one, here's the evidence that I've been presented with, and if you have something more, let me know. And he and I discussed that on a couple of occasions.
Yeah, that's basically what I do. I mean, I collect the reports, I do some investigation, and then I get a lot of good feedback and comments. I mean, I had this woman that had an X-ray, and the strange object showed up uh, right above her in the back of her neck, and she sent me the X-rays, and I got a million hits on that report. I got 10 comments from MDs. It turns out it was a life alert penchant that the technician, the X-ray technician, forgot to remove. And I mean, you put the information out there, and it generates interest, and you get the good feedback. And I don't know everything. I mean, I'm a meteorologist. I have radar expertise. And but I definitely, I don't claim to have all the answers. I do believe that UFOs are visiting the Earth. I do believe that many of them are extraterrestrial, and some of them are higher dimensional and paranormal type phenomena. I'm almost convinced of it. But again,
Hey,
a lot of
William,
these reports are anecdotal.
William, I gotta stop you, man. We're flat out running out of time here. I
Sure.
really appreciate taking time to share the stories with us and discuss the phenomenon with me here on the Different Perspective. Probably I'd like to have you back sometime. You up for that?
I sure am. I mean, stay tuned to my site, and if you're get on coast to coast and you see any good reports, feel free to present them. And I've got a good backlog of 10 or 15 reports that I don't even have on my site yet. And the
And
Las Vegas case will be further investigated.
your site is www.ufosnw.com. William Puckett is the man's name. He's been doing UFO research for quite a long time. William, thank you again for being on A Different Perspective.
Well, thanks very much for having me, and you have a great day and stay healthy.
You
I look
too.
forward to talking to you in the future.
And have fun into your windstorm there in Montana.
Yeah, sorry about the power interruption. We got her going again. We were lucky, but
Yeah.
I figured that would happen.
Okay. Thank you much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. Well, as I said, in the next couple of weeks, I think we've got some very interesting programs coming up here on A Different Perspective. I'm really looking forward to talking to Dr. Loeb about the artifact that he believes was an artificial artifact moving through the solar system. I think other scientists believe it wasn't. It was an alien artifact, but maybe not artificial. And I would looking forward to getting his perspective on that as well. And given some of the things that he has said and some of the information I have from him and when I had my communications with him, I think he's much more open to the idea of UFOs than many of his colleagues, I guess is the best way to say it. So we'll be talking with him. And as I say, I've done quite a bit of work on this Vietnam Ground Zero blog, and I know that really doesn't fit into our format here, but I thought people would like to take a look at that and get an idea of who I am and where my background comes from and my experiences with the military. I know that a lot of people claim military backgrounds who don't have them, and I think this is a way of kind of verifying my background in that respect. In fact, I've got a picture up on that blog at www.vietnamgroundzero.blogspot.com of my flight school class. So you can see what I looked like. Well, it's hard to see me in the picture, but because it's the entire platoon, but it's up there to kind of help verify that in the way of my background. And as I say, I would appreciate it, those of you who buy the books and take a look at the books, if you put a rating, put a review up on the books, that kind of helps spread the word and get it out there so that people will be more interested in what we're doing. So as I say, if you have a chance, take a look at the X-Zone Broadcast Network for some other programs on the paranormal. And you have been listening to A Different Perspective on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, and I'll be back in 167 hours. So thank you for tuning in.